As I usually say at this point, this is a quasi-judicial meeting and no decisions are made in advance of the meeting. The members of the committee sit as representatives of the whole council and not as ward councillors. And as the Lord Mayor always reminds us, we do not enjoy parliamentary privilege in this or any other meeting. So that's something to be aware of when you speak. Turning to the agenda, we start with the notice of recording and webcast. This meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site, which is a very long reference with a lot of numbers and letters, so much easier to search on YouTube for Birmingham City Council meetings. And members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items, of which I don't expect to have any today. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item, and any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. That's the standard declarations of interest paragraphs for all Birmingham City Council meetings. In addition, you may hear members withdraw from a discussion because they have previously expressed a view on a site or a particular application, and the same rules apply that will be recorded. Item 3 is apologies. At this point, when we're looking at the attendance of the meeting, can I welcome Councillor Kate Booth, who's joined us now in place of Councillor Kath Scott. I have apologies today from Councillor Griffiths, Donaldson, Johnson, Beecham, Stanford and Straker Wells. Members and members of the public may be aware that we've had a COVID alert. Sadly, the government withdrew the right for us to meet virtually, and therefore we have to meet in person, both today and for other council meetings. So it's not our choice to meet in person. This is imposed on us, and that's why we've got a high number of apologies today. We are quorate, and we do have representatives of all the parties who are normally represented on the committee. So we will be proceeding. The only chair's announcements I've got are that our next 3 meetings will be on the 30th of September and the 7th and 21st of October. All the usual precautions allowing that to happen. On to the minutes. We only have the minutes of the 19th of August. On this occasion, we'll catch up with the 2nd of September. In future, can we agree the minutes of the 19th of August? Yeah, the microphone doesn't pick up noddings. Can I have a couple of people? Thank you. Okay, that takes us already on to planning applications. We do these on a geographical basis, and today we're starting with the northwest of the city. We only have speakers on one item, which is item 6. In item 6, so if you've come to speak today, you're very welcome. The order in which we take things on each item are first updates, then speakers if we have them, then a response from the relevant officer to points made by the speakers, and then we open up to members of the committee. So item 6 is 35 Wilson Road, Handsworth. So we will start with an update on this application. Brilliant.
We received an email from Birmingham Property Services commenting on the prospect of varying the links to the application premises, advising that the council, in its capacity as an LPA, is not more practically than the council for the separate independent capacity of landowner will vary.
Thank you for that. That confirms that these are completely separate processes and that planning decision does not bind property services other than to comply with the planning decision, if you see what I mean. We'll come to that if we need to. Okay then, if that's all the updates, Sean, I'll hand over to you to introduce our speakers and to time them.
Thanks, Chair. We have Councillor Zafar, who wants to speak in objection to the application. You have 3 minutes. I will jump in 15 seconds before the end, just to warn you that your time is up, but start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to formally object to the planning application to convert 35 Wilson Road in my ward of Lazelles from a nursery to a 9-bedroom shared accommodation. I have a very personal connection to this building. I attended preschool education at these premises. I carried out my religious education in this building. My first ever full-time job was at these premises. And up until February this year, I had lived my entire life on the neighbouring road. I'm someone who knows the importance of this building better than most. You will note from the application that West Midlands Police have objected. Lazelles has had extra police resources in recent months to assist with dealing with the rising community safety concerns. Many of the issues that the police are having to deal with are due to premises where there is shared accommodation. Whilst I do not want to publicly discuss a live police investigation and will refrain from sharing confidential information, I will only say that an exempt accommodation property less than 20 metres from these premises has had a considerable amount of police activity this week in relation to a city-wide search for a wanted serious offender. I share the concern of the police that this application could have an adverse impact on the already challenging community safety issues in this neighbourhood. Chair, you will note from the report that along with 13 individual letters of objection, nearly 300 residents, mainly from Wilson Road, Leonard Road and Hatfield Road, surrounding roads since application, have signed a petition objecting to this application. We want this very important historical community asset to remain a community asset delivering vital services that are needed in this neighbourhood. The nursery is a vital community service for which the demand of the local community is substantial. Chair, I want the committee to be absolutely aware that the Birmingham City Council are the freeholder of these premises, and before these premises were put out on the market back in 2019, I was consulted as a local councillor, as is common practice. At that stage, I requested that property services ensure that any future usage is limited to D1 and D2 community use. As stated in the update from the officer, no communication and or permission has been requested by the applicant with the freeholder with respect to this application. I'm aware, Chair, that the report in section 6.8 highlights that there are a number of HMOs within 100 metres of these premises. I have made some personal inquiries, and to add to these HMOs, there are an extra 13 exempt accommodations within 100 metres of these premises. Whilst technically exempt accommodations are not HMOs, exempt accommodations operate and look like HMOs, and for many streets across our city, they have made life very difficult for our communities. I fully support the provision of supported living. For many, it is an opportunity and a second chance for them that they desperately need. But there needs to be a balance in neighbourhoods. Lazelles has far more than its
15 seconds
of supported accommodation that have had a detrimental impact on the quality of our residents. This building is a vital community asset. The police have objected strongly. The local community has objected in their hundreds. The freeholders are aware of this application, and it's unlikely to support this application. I urge the community to refuse this application and save this vital community asset.
Thank you very much. We now have the applicants who, Mr. Morrison and Miss McIntosh, who I understand you're going to share the 3 minutes between you, and you're going to do that between you. So I'll let you do that, and I'll just jump in 15 seconds before the end just to allow you to wrap up. So start whenever you like.
And thank you, Chair. The comments made by the objector is very understandable. However, the provision that we're seeking to establish does not in any way reflect any of those issues, because they are premised on the needs of young people in the locality and young people in Birmingham. If we take, for example, that the Youth Homelessness Parliament last year identified a number of issues of support that were needed. Then those just give you an indication of the kind of issues that we're focusing on. If there is going to be a comparator in respect of what we're proposing to do, then the YMCA, which is the single biggest independent provider of housing for young people 18 to 35 in the country, they provide currently 9,100 beds. That would be the realistic provider, because within that context, we have a range of ongoing support that will be delivered to the young people if this application was approved.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting us. My name is Herman McIntosh and I represent Kijan's Women's Enterprise. But I didn't hear what you said, so I quite like a copy of your contribution later, please. The provision that we are seeking to develop, we have consulted widely in the local community. I have a copy of not just the plans, but a letter which stated absolutely how we will operate this provision, and it is not an HMO, though I've seen a lot on the internet from our local councillor about it being an HMO. It is not that. It is a provision that is supporting young women 16 to 25 who are in transition to adulthood. And we want to make it clear at the moment, in terms of the women's organisation that I represent, that we come across numerous young women who, even at 20, the issue of maturity and their ability to operate safely and to keep themselves progressing through their education and their training is an issue. This is a 24-hour supervised provision for young women in transition to adulthood. It is not an HMO, and it's not an accommodation simply that is rented for multiple occupants. It is managed by an experienced women's organisation.
Thank you very much. In terms of copies about what anybody has said in the meeting, the minutes will be available of the meeting, and there is a recording that will be online that you'll be able to watch if you want to. So whatever's said.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, I'll do that.
Sure.
Thank you. Claudia, do you want to come back on the points raised? Could you speak up? We are, if I can just explain, officers are staying in their seats rather than coming down to the top table today because of the COVID issue. So if you're sitting further back, I do need you to project.
We are aware of the West Midlands legal objection, and you'll note from the report that the recommended conditions have been attached to the recommendation. In respect of the property acting as a community asset and Birmingham City Council operating as freeholder and the covenants attached to that, I have set out in our update that BPS have advised that a grant of planning permission would not necessarily result in a variation of the lease. However, from the perspective of issuing a planning consent on the site, that is outside of planning considerations and will be dealt with separately.
Thank you. And if I could just clarify what I said earlier, then a decision to grant planning consent today would not bind property services. A refusal would, if people just understand that point. Okay, over to members then. Who wants to speak on this one? Councillor Idris.
Thanks, Chair. This application is quite resonance to me because where I live is a little number of 22 properties. Out of those, 3 are supported accommodation. Later, people coming from outside, drug pushers coming in within minutes gone, and I can understand how the community feels. I can understand how, as a local resident, I feel day in, day out. The main antisocial behavior is very sensitive, but I sympathy for them. But the problems that brings in, it does matter to the local residents, local neighborhood. And I can understand that because people, they were asking me to live locally. So what are you doing about it? I've seen people pushing drugs, selling drugs. People living in those properties. And the next door resident, they have mentioned so many times that there is frustration. And the ring the police do not tell them.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Councillor Idris. Can I just clarify whether you're talking about the area of this application or the area where you live?
But I'm giving you the sort of issues that these bring in, and a lot of people, the residents, have to endure day in, day out.
Can you just clarify the point that I've asked you about there? The detail of the sort of problems you're talking about where you live.
That's another experience, and I can see, why the local council because he gets the complaints as by the residents, and I can see why the police are complaining about it because they experience day in day out those sort of problems, and they have to do it. And I can say, because on community asset, there is a dire need of family housing within Birmingham and in the local areas and within Rosals as well. And a property of this size could have been, it can be converted into a 5 to 6 2-bedroom family flats, creating no problems for anybody and accommodating at least 6 families. And finally, I would say, community cohesion is very important for everybody. And this sort of support accommodation, there's no community cohesion. Where I live, people come, they live their own life. They don't talk to the local residents. They don't talk to each other. And I got sympathy for the service users, but we want the communities living together, integrated, and no tensions.
Councillor Azim.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is not suitable that what is going to be used for now, because that was a nursery before, and I think that should be used for the community facilities. And the other thing is that because the people who lives on that area and that road, they are making a complaint about nearly 300 people are against this one. When they are residents, they know how, what kind of problem they have, and I think we should listen to them as well. Because when something is, gone through, and nobody can guarantee for that, because there is already very high ground in that area and antisocial behavior, and that's I think the residents already I think fed up of these things, and they don't want any more disturbance. They want to live in that area, they love that area, they want to be a peaceful life. And I think that's not a suitable place for such a thing like, put the single ladies in there or what they are, in what category. Nobody can say that. So I think it is not suitable for this place. I am totally against this. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify in terms of the police objection, because if not mistaken, Councillor Zappa said they strongly objected. it just says that they raise concerns, and obviously there's a difference between strongly objecting and raising concerns. So I just want to clarify that the officer report correctly reflects the police's view on this matter. And I also just want a bit more clarification in terms of its operation, because although the phrase isn't used within the report, I got the impression this will be operating as some sort of women's refuge, and therefore exactly how will the people who be presumably living here, if it's given permission, will be supported in that? Will these be victims of domestic abuse, for example? Because I think very much depending on who's living there will affect whether the level of antisocial behaviour which has been alleged will take place or not. So I think it's been touched on, but I'd like a bit more information exactly as to what the operation will be at these premises to establish what the level of crime and antisocial behaviour will be.
Come back to that in the officer's response. Councillor Mear.
I have concern with this application, Chair. At this moment, it is a nursery and it is being used as a community asset. As we are all aware, we are losing a community asset across the city, and we should be more supporting community asset than taking them away from our city. Secondly, the police have huge concern on this application. So I find myself in a difficult position, Chair, on this application. Thank you.
Councillor Silverman.
Thank you, Chair. While I recognise that it's vital that we provide good quality social housing and there is that real need in the city. Following on from Councillor Moore's sort of point, I think there isn't any guarantee on sort of, or we haven't got enough information to say how the residents will be selected to live in this property. I think certain areas across the city are ending up with concentrations of these supported and HMO type of properties, and I think this is where although there's a need, it's kind of creating sort of a bad reputation for these, and obviously that has a lot to do with the way that they run as well. I understand that, but I think we just need to really factor that in. And although the 10% policy doesn't apply here, I think on the balance of things, it would impact the area because there is no existing large HMO supported population in this area. In terms of it being a community asset, I think the other thing that I'd like to point out that we are currently having a national shortage of childcare places, and we hope that's going to be made a lot worse. So I'd be quite concerned, having a look in the application, that this property has got a history of being used as an education type of property, whether that would the impact that would have. In terms of the police concerns that they've raised, I think the sort of element that I was become on the sort of in that report was that actual real fear that there is within the community, and whether it's being justified or not, that it's there. And I don't think sort of having CCTV can kind of alleviate that. To the degree that it's there. So on the balance of things, I don't think that I can support this application.
Councillor Cornish.
Well, with respect, Chairman, my comments will be very limited today because sitting here, you cannot take on board what is being said around us today. Almost impossible to hear clearly. So my decision on this particular application will be made on the evidence provided in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the response to the points raised? And if there is anything we can do to improve the sound in the room, I know we've done quite a lot of work on the podcast. If there's anything we can do other than people speak up, that would be helpful. I'm looking in your direction, Julie. Got him.
In terms of the comments made in respect of... Sorry. In terms of the comments made in respect of antisocial behaviour, concerns and the comments from West Midlands Police. These did note concern, however, they advised that conditions would be sufficient to mitigate that impact, which have been attached to the recommendation. With regards to the operation and the occupation of the premises, a draft allocations policy was submitted in support of the application, which set out how prospective residents would be referred and how they would be supervised. And a condition has been attached to the recommendation to secure an operation and management plan prior to occupation based on that draft allocations policy. That would need to be submitted to the LPA for their comments and approval in advance of the use operating. With regards to community cohesion, I think those points are covered by the two conditions mentioned alongside a condition to limit the number of residents to 9 women within the age limit specified within the application.
Okay, does anybody else wish?
Sure.
Sorry, carry on, Sean.
Thank you. There was a couple of things mentioned. In terms of the asset of community value, this phrase has been used a couple of times. This isn't, as far as I'm aware, this isn't registered as an asset of community value. So we're using this as a tag, but actually it isn't an asset of community value. It's a day nursery. There isn't any protection for day nurseries. And you don't have the choice of saying you prefer this use to another use. So whether you would prefer this building to be used as a day nursery or as 3 flats or as a hostel, that's not the question here. The question that you need to address is the proposed use as a hostel to accommodate 9 vulnerable young women acceptable or not? That's the question before you. And you can see from the report that it sets out the issues very clearly. In terms of the principle of the use, there's nothing there's no policies or anything to prevent it. We look at the amenity levels within and outside the property, and you'll see the report say that from an amenity point of view, the property is acceptable. The internal space is acceptable. There is internal communal areas that are sufficient, and there is outside space for the residents that are also sufficient. The other comments that have been made have been around the fear of crime and disorder, and I think that's, I'll point you to paragraph 621, and as Councillor Moore asked, and has been pointed out, there isn't an objection from the police against this use. It's saying that there are potential issues with people who are unrelated living together, but those issues can be dealt with by the measures that they've indicated. In addition, as you've already heard, are proposing to attach a condition for vulnerable young women. So it's targeted at that use. And secondly, we're requiring a management plan that governs how the building is managed and how the people are selected who will live there. So I think that we have a package here that is acceptable, and accordingly the recommendation is clear to permit. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have to say that I didn't hear anyone use the term asset of community value, which is a defined process, which hasn't taken place in this case. I did hear people refer to it as a community asset, which is a general opinion.
Understand the local community, the neighborhoods, they have to endure day in, day out, antisocial behavior, rising crime, leading to very serious crime. And we have to be mindful of what the impact this sport accommodation brings. And it's been slow for the last 6 months, at least, or 6 to 8 months. Where are the highly concentrated life in Lyttleton, what sort of issues people are facing.
I'm sorry, Councillor Idris, you must vote on planning grounds rather than any other opinion. I have heard people raise planning grounds during this, but the integrity of our decision is based on it being on planning grounds. Are you ready to move to the vote on this one? Seeing nobody to the contrary, can I see those in favour of the application? 3, and those against? 4, and abstentions. So by 4 votes to 3, that is technically deferred minded to refuse. What I heard in the debate was, and we record this so that officers have got something to go on, to come back to the committee with grounds for refusal, was the issue of the value to the community of the nursery, so the community asset point, which, as Sean has indicated, officers may not be able to turn into a ground for refusal. I also heard potential harm to the community through antisocial behaviour, and I also heard concerns about the balance of the neighbourhood and community cohesion. Were there any other points that people were taking into account in how they voted? No, so can we take those points away and come back with potential grounds for refusal? Thank you very much. We move on then to item 7, which is 29 Reddycap Hill in Sutton Coldfield. Do we have updates on this one?
A further drainage condition has been recommended by the water runoff from the driveway and the driveway. Definitely, proposed development is liable for levy and capital.
Okay, we don't have speakers on any further items, so it's straight over to members. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, the removal of permitted development rights for extensions and for windows does give me some sort of concern that this is possibly over-intensive site. I'm also concerned with the possibility of the boundary turning point. However, the surrounding area has a mix of housing and use doesn't have any character as such. And this application will require confirming further from these homes and is separate of all sections. All of them quite well the existing development, which is very close by. But I would like some clarification on any effect on number 21, the turning point, please.
Thank you. Any further points on this one? No? Okay, can we have answers on those?
Okay, so the removal of community development rights recommended as conditions is to secure adequate amenity for any future residents in respect of external mental spaces and ensuring there's no instances of overlooking. And this is the result that the scheme was submitted for 6 units to begin with, and has been reduced to 4. So the recommendation for that condition is just to ensure residential amenity. We're satisfied that the revised proposals of 4 units amount to an appropriate density and would not be over intense. In respect of the comment on the boundary turning point impact on 21 Reddycap Hill, the boundary treatment is for a 2.4 metre acoustic fence. So I'm satisfied that that has been dealt with adequately in terms of residential impact to the neighbours at number 21.
Thank you. Anybody wish to come up back? Councillor Azim.
Thank you, Chair. I think as there is much demand for the family houses, and then there was, which is going to be demolished, one house is there, and then going to build up 4 houses, because there are 3 bedrooms, there are parking and everything is there, and I think that is very useful for the area, because we need some more family houses. And I think that's a very good project, and there will be some issue about the trees, and I think some trees are going to be remained and some new are going to be planted. I think that's very good project and good for the area.
Thank you. Anyone else on this one? I'm not sure there's anything there to respond to.
Just in terms of the impact on the trees, the majority of the trees on the site would be retained. There'd be a couple lost in the central site where the contour development would actually be. However, that would be mitigated through the planting of replacement trees in sort of gardens and in the landscaped area along the acoustic fence.
Thank you. Are you ready to vote on this one? Can I see those in favour? That's 8, which is everybody, so that is approved unanimously. Moving on, item 8, we're still in the northwest. Item 8 is Unit 13 on the Holford Industrial Estate on Tameside Drive. Any updates?
Just that the Canal Room Trust have responded to the consultation request and advised that they have no objection.
Thank you. Does anyone want to speak on this one? Having studied the report then and heard the update, are you ready to vote? Hearing none to the contrary, can I see those in favour of the application? Again, that is 8 in favour, so that is unanimously approved. We're moving on now to the south area, starting with item 9, 29 Lockwood Road, Northfield. Do we have any updates on this, Louise?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just an update from the applicant, just in response to some of the comments within the committee reports. Just briefly summarise what those comments were. He notes an objection from Councillor Freeman. It's the fact that HMOs do not have adequate living standards based on his experience. The applicant states they are proposing a high-end luxury HMO for working professionals that meet all living standards, etc. Also want to point out that previous occupants of the house were a family of 6. The applicant is proposing a smaller number of occupants, purpose-built space and standards to meet the requirements. In addition, he notes that the neighbour objected for the reason of there being no demand for this type of accommodation in Northfield. He has a supporting document from a letting agent suggesting the opposite. An online portal for houses and rooms indicates at the moment 10 rooms available to rent compared to 704 prospective tenants wanting to rent a room. Reiterates the clarity of the house who uses working professionals in the examination area and family bodies.
Thank you. I'll bring in any members that wish to speak. Nobody on this one? Okay, are you ready to vote on this? Can I see those in favour of the application? I'll make that 4 in favour. Those against? That's 3 against, so that is 4-3 in favour, and therefore that is approved. Thank you. Moving on, staying in the south. Item 10 is the land on the southeast side of Silver Street in Kings Heath, the former International Stock Warehouse, a site familiar to some members of the committee, I think. Louise, do we have any updates on this one?
No updates on this one, Chair, just for members' benefit. This is on planning committee because it exceeds the number of apartments that we could deal with under delegated powers, which is 40, this is 52. You can see the scheme in front of you. It's a scheme submitted by Churchill Retirement for a site in Kings Heath. Positive recommendation, we're happy with the layout and the design. No objections from either statutory or non-statutory consultees. You'll see we've negotiated an off-site contribution for affordable housing and no hesitation in recommending the application for approval, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on this one? No? Okay. If, having studied the report and heard the updates, you're ready to vote, I will start the voting process. And I see those in favour. That's 7 in favour, which is everybody in the room at present. So that is approved unanimously. Moving on again, we're heading for the city centre. And item 11 is the Broadway building at the junction of Broad Street and Ladywood Middleway at 5 Ways. Oh, you're hiding in the corner, Nick. Have you got any updates?
No updates, Chair, but as with the last item, this is before us because it exceeds the delegation threshold this time on the floor.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on this one?
Because in terms of, I noticed that there's a variety of uses being sought, but one of them is what was formerly referred to as light industrial use. And I just wanted to clarify because I was of the understanding that I thought the whole building had been converted into residential, but clearly that is not the case. But the report seems to suggest that the residential element is much further away, and I'm trying to find the reference, but I'm sure it refers to Broadway Residences being over at Broadway Plaza, which is not the case. I assume it's part of that. So I just want to double check, given that one of the objections raised refers to building work and noise nuisance, that we have fully taken into account the residential element with this. Because reading the report, it gives the impression that it's much further away than it actually is.
Anyone else? Nick, can you respond?
Yeah, so in terms of Broadway Residences, that is part of the sister part of this building, so it is just across the way, as you know. I can't reference okay, but that's the box that is Broadway Residences, and we have considered that. Helpfully at 1.1, the officer here has set out the former definitions of what B1, B2, B1C were. And in terms of light industrial, it's an industrial process that could be carried out in a residential area without creating an amenity issue. So, and also this use has been going on at 8 Helford Road with residents around it and without issue. And this is exactly the same use, so we're not anticipating any kind of ongoing disturbance during maintenance, construction works, but nothing unusual.
Anyone else wish to ask a question or contribute on this one? No? Shall we move to the vote then? Can I see those in favour? That's 7, so that is approved unanimously. And we move on to item 12, which is 40 Upper Gough Street. Nick, updates?
We do have a couple of updates on this one, Chair, thank you. So, firstly, at 1.1 in the report, the total floor space figure is 20,260 square metres, not 20,005, which is set out later in that same paragraph. And secondly, we've had a further letter of objection on behalf of the owners of the adjacent building within this wider city block, raising concerns that have been set out in the report, but reiterating their concerns around the impact on their property, and in particular, the potential of them in the future to have solar panels through impacts of overshadowing on that, and also the potential roof terrace that they are looking at. In response to that additional representation, the report obviously sets out an impact of the proposals on in terms of sunlight and daylight to neighbouring residential properties. And there's no formal assessment of the impact on the objector's commercial property being commercial use. There are no specific local policies around the impact of the proposal on potential solar panels, although we acknowledge that the proposal may impact on their feasibility in the long run, and therefore there could be an overall sustainability impact, but in the opposite community should be given in the way the decision making. And obviously the fact that they're proposed, they're not there at the moment, to my mind, diminish that way it should be. Similarly, there are no policies concerning loss of rights to roof terrace associated with commercial buildings. Again, that should be minimum weight, planning balance, and obviously the fact that there is open space around here, immediately opposite these gardens, which is often that people working in that building could use. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to come in on this one? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the first one is a positive comment in terms of the design of the building, particularly Block A. It's nice to see we're not being asked to approve another box, which we seem to be going far too much within the city centre. I just wanted clarification because I know obviously the impact on heritage assets is considered within the report, but there doesn't appear to be any consultation with Historic England or in fact any of the usual heritage bodies. So I just wanted to clarify that because considering this is talking about an impact on a church, at our last meeting we were considering a very similar issue whereby Historic England had objected and other historic heritage bodies had commented. So I just want to clarify, is there a particular reason why we don't appear to have consulted with them?
Anyone else? No, can you come back on those points, please, Nick?
Yeah, of course. I don't think I need to add anything to the design. To welcome that positive feedback. In terms of heritage, the development does affect setting of grade 2 listed St Thomas's and the unlisted or memory relocated walnuts and non-designated asset. The reason that Historic England and the Lights Victoria Society were consulted is as it's setting of grade 2, not grade 2 style, but grade 1, there is no requirement to consult. Of course, occasionally in that circumstance, bodies make a representation anyway, but in this circumstance, in this situation, it's really happened.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Moore? You're looking as if
well, I'm just,
questions unanswered.
For the sake of an asterisk, I'm just kind of slightly thought, given that there is a heritage impact, which is considered in the report, I just thought it would be useful to have the view of Historic England on that. So, but I suppose if we don't have to, and as long as they were aware of it and had the opportunity to comment, then that's fine. But I kind of would suggest that the fact that they haven't responded may mean they don't know about it. That's my slight worry.
Well, just to come back, they do respond when they're not consulted. So they obviously do check the key lists. So that exercise. And of course, there isn't very much in the city centre that doesn't affect a listed building.
Okay, anyone else? No? In that case, we'll proceed to the vote. Can I see those in favour of the application? That's 7, so that is unanimously approved. That was the city centre. We're moving east now. And item 13 is Unit 1 Landor Street, which is in B8. Do we have any updates on this one?
No update, Chair.
Okay. Any comments on this one? No? Having studied the report, are you ready to vote? Okay, can I see those in favour? And that's 7 again, so that is unanimously approved. And our last application of the day is agenda item 14, which is 76 Admington Road, Garrett's Green. This is on the agenda because Councillor Ward asked for it to be on the agenda. That doesn't count as expressing a view on it. So I'll ask for any updates on this one.
Yes, Chair, there is updates. Section 3, plan history of the committee report needs to be updated to include current enforcement case or the change of use to HMO, what is being sought under this grant application. The enforcement case is pending, subject to the outcome of this planning application.
Thank you. And members will know that a planning application is a valid response to an enforcement case, and no particular weight should be given to the fact that that's the route by which it reached us. Anyone wish to speak on this one? Councillor Mear?
Yes, Chair. I know the area pretty well, Chair. I have come here to this meeting with an open mind. The area we're referring to has got huge antisocial behavior issue. Also, it has got huge fly tipping issue in that area. These are the 2 points that I wanted to raise. It will be a difficult one for me to support. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come in on this one? Okay, nobody else wishes to speak at the moment. Can we have a response to those points?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. In terms of antisocial behaviour and other points what you raised, this is a retention of the HMO, which has been operated a number of years. In terms of the consultation, whether from West Midlands Police, there is no objection to the actual proposal. Our environmental regulator services haven't raised any objection whatsoever. In terms of the standard of accommodation and in terms of quality, in terms of outdoor meeting space, everything complies to standard. There is a license which has been issued as well by our council PRS, which is in December 2019, which actually looks into some aspect as well. So, health and safety and other kind of hazardous aspect.
Thank you. Just the usual reminder that the licensing process is completely separate from the planning process. Does anyone else wish to come in, or are you ready to vote on this one? Can I see those in favour of the application? And those against? And those abstaining? Okay, I made that 1 in favour, 3 against and 3 abstentions. Was it 4 against? I've only got 7 people.
Change votes halfway through.
I made it 1-3-3. Tondick? Yep. Okay, you haven't given us very much to go on in terms of reasons for refusal. What I heard was harm to the neighbourhood from antisocial behaviour, and I think the fly tipping would come into that category rather than be a separate point. So that's all I'm hearing at the moment. So that is deferred for officers to explore that reason for refusal, I think is the easiest way to put that. Okay, that does bring us to the end of applications for today. Item 15 is other urgent business, which won't wait till the next meeting. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if there's any news on the transparency drive and trying to make deal with the issues of data disclosure and letting us know who applicants are. I've raised this previously and asked for which we would like to speak on local authority speak, but we don't seem to be any further on that.
It's the GDPR issue. It's virtually done. I've completed a review of the advice against previous legal advice that the council had, and my conclusions will be presented to the director very shortly, within the next couple of days. So I'm anticipating it will be done well.
We can be told the outcome of that as well. Something.
Well, I can tell you what I think, but yes, we'll do. I mean, my view, having reviewed the latest advice, the previous advice from the QC, is that our current stance of not divulging applicants' names, addresses, telephone numbers or emails, or third parties' personal data, was a decision taken at the, I suppose, most risk-averse end of the spectrum, at a point in time where there wasn't any clear advice from any of the national bodies. The QC at the time, I think, was suggesting that a less restrictive approach could be taken, and considered that maybe applicants' names and addresses could be revealed, and that there was a case for revealing third-party addresses on the basis that when you are considering the weight of objections as a decision-making body, it helps, or it might help you to understand where objections are coming from, to give weight to those objections. And that's something I personally agree with. Looking at the PAS advice that's just come out, which was done in consultation with the ICO, they appear to be going down that same route as well. And they're advocating that the release of applicants' names and addresses is acceptable, but not their email addresses or phone numbers. And my view is that with the backup of that national guidance, that gives the authority some cover in terms of the risk, because it's still not clear. There still isn't any clear ruling that one thing's acceptable and the other isn't. But I think in terms of the risk spectrum, that gives the authority some cover, and my recommendation is going to be that we move to doing that. In terms of third parties, I think that we could reveal the road number, the road name, but not necessarily the property identifier, the name or number of the property. And that would give the members an idea of where it came from. The issue we have is that with the current software, we can't publish third-party representations to the web anyway. So that's something we're going to look at separately. What I'm trying to do is establish the GDPR policy that includes that, so that at the point we can publish onto the web, we have a policy in place already to do so. So that's where we are.
And I can confirm that in our catch-up meeting earlier this week, I was assured that it was at the top of Sean's list.
Yeah, so apologies that it hasn't been Lightspeed, but a few other things have cropped up in the meantime that have distracted me. Thank you.
Okay, any other items under this heading? No, in that case, we go on to item 16, which is authority to chair and officers in an urgent situation between meetings to act on behalf of the committee. Can we agree that? Thank you. That is it for this morning. Thank you very much. Next time we'll be in a different room. We'll send the details out with the agenda because we are trying to strike a balance between the room used and the ventilation, given that we've had an issue that we've had to address this morning. And I'm aware that the air filter was moved to try and minimise the disruption in sound while still being an effective ventilation measure for us in this particular room. So thank you very much. You can go off and get your coffee or your lunch or whatever you're doing next. Thank you.